Hi, this is Matt Hugg with Nonprofit.Courses, bringing you a presentation by GreatCareers BENG, the Business Executive Networking Group, and with Mark McCurdy. And I hope you enjoyed Mark's presentation on 4 points in transitioning for a nonprofit career. And now we have Q&A. So let's get started.
And just to say, obviously grateful again to be here and the opportunity to be in front of you and take some questions.
There we are. Well, thank you, Mark. This is great. I actually have a couple of questions here that have come up that I think we can start with. And then as other people have something, just unmute yourself and, we'll try not to make this quite a free-for-all, but a little organized chaos. So what are the biggest obstacles you've seen when somebody is trying to make a transition from the for-profit into the nonprofit world?
Yeah, I mean, I think, everyone's got a different experience. And I do think, some skills and abilities tend to be, or the verbiage and the way that nonprofit and for-profits talk about it can be similar. So for example, finance and marketing, those terms tend to be pretty consistent. Again, there's grant funding and some other things that you won't find, certainly in the for-profit space. But I would say, initially for folks is learning a little bit of the lingo and then being kind of confident on, hey, here are where my skills and to some respect transferable skills can add value to this team, this organization, so on and so forth. So I think it's, some of the lingo can be a little confusing, and so I'd say that's one. Two, I do think there's something to be said for again, this idea of I'm really excited about your mission, right? And sometimes that can get lost in a transition, just to say, hey, a nonprofit sounds great, and I'm not for now. I haven't really given much thought of what communities could really important. But I think for particularly smaller and more mid-sized nonprofits, this is part of some of the connection of people are really passionate about these communities, and so. And they've maybe been it for a long time, right? Whether they start as a volunteer and have seen it grown and or right, some of these nonprofits they a lot of nonprofits, right, start from that kind of really grassroots standpoint and have people engaged. So I think for folks that haven't really talked about kind of passion and community and those within the kind of workplace. Sometimes that's a different shift to make, right? And can be challenging for people to really talk about because just they haven't had that practice.
So when strategic volunteering is a fascinating concept. I think it's worth exploring. Tell how would you suggest anybody start with finding a place to volunteer, or are there better places to do that than not? I mean, is this in effect another kind of a leverage to networking? Is that kind of what we're talking about here?
Sure. It's another avenue for sure, and this is where I've certainly seen. So first and foremost, strategic volunteering, I never say it's the quickest way to a job. The fastest I've seen for clients that I've worked with is 6 weeks, but I've seen it take as much as even 2 years, right? So it's not the quickest way to a job. I'm going to say that, but for sure, I've also seen dozens of clients get into a strategic volunteering place. They're excited about the mission. They're really adding value. And that it's someone at that organization that says, oh, hey, I know you're looking for work. Hey, my colleague, or friend, or whatever the case is at organization down the road they have an opening. Let me make that connection. I've seen that really work out
So it's not,
numerous times to be very fruitful.
so
But
it's not just trying to get a job at the place you're volunteering. It's
right.
getting exposed to other places around you. Yeah.
I mean, as a whole, it's building your network,
Right.
and that the best case scenario is you found a nonprofit, and that either a job opens or maybe someone leaves, while you're there. I mean, that's the best scenario. But also, this kind of concept of, particularly for those that are making a transition, a career transition, if you've been able to find an organization, and get engaged with them in some way, shape, or form. I'm not saying it's like a Monday through Friday, kind of strategic volunteering opportunity. But if you've already found that opportunity, that organization, that mission before there's a job posting, I mean, you're just ahead of the game, right? Because if you're really just searching for the job, there's other people that found that organization because they were searching for the job. But if you can, even if you've so let's just take a very general, social service organization focused on youth. Okay, just very generally, let's say you're there and or you're working with an organization strategically volunteering. There's plenty of nonprofits that like a United Way and others that kind of focus in that or some way, shape, or form. So if you've strategically volunteered, in that space, you have a story to tell then to like a United Way or something to say, hey, I've been engaged in that space already, and I'm not just chasing a job, right?
Mm.
So I think that's important. But um, for me, strategic volunteering is almost a form of what's called skill-based volunteering, right? So it is about not just the mission, but it's also about what skills are you bringing to the table that really are adding value. And so to come back, are there some spaces or maybe more efficient spaces to look at? One that has grown, and they're doing a lot of virtual space now, and it's skill-based volunteering, but they're called Catch-a-Fire.
Mm.
And so this is where you go and you can look actually really through the skills. So whether it's marketing, finance, sales, operations, you even technology, right? You can find opportunities, online to then strategically volunteer with organizations. And what's nice there is that organization, Catch a Fire, will thank you, Lynn, for putting that in there. Catch a Fire will then help translate that story into say, oh, you actually helped that nonprofit save X amount of money because because of your time there. And that's also an interesting vantage point too, to say, hey, if you volunteer, and particularly it's skill-based volunteering, you can translate that into helping save that organization money too, right? So on your resume, right, that's something that you could now put on there.
Cool. Well, now, one of the other things you said I thought was really important is being able to define what you want to do. I always describe it to people as you're going to now make other people your volunteers, right? Because
Right,
you're going
right.
to go out and tell them what you want, and then they can go spread that network out. Tell me, can you talk a little more about that? Because I think that's a really important concept.
um yeah, I mean, so I guess it's kind of in that focus space. Is that where you're?
Yeah, right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So um once you are clear on what skills, abilities and talents that you're really excited to bring to the table, and that then your even local community, so whether it's in these environments, networking groups, but even your neighbor or family members, right? Like, if instead of saying, oh, I'm just looking for a job in nonprofit, but if you're saying, boy, I'd be really excited to connect up with someone, at a could be a health, organization, or an organization focused on youth or families or women or men, or whatever that community might be for you. That I feel is more powerful, not only for you as you search and you do your job search and look maybe for opportunities in the strategic volunteering base, but also then your network has a clear idea of where they could really help you or introduce you to. Um, because it's often been the case where, as we've dug dug down deeper, like, oh my God, that's right. My aunt, my uncle, my sister, my sister's fiance, or whatever the case is, like, oh my God, they're actually in that space. I totally forgot about that. So, oftentimes you're able to kind of uncover some, hidden folks within your network that you kind of forgot about, or hadn't kind of uplifted in that light.
And it's funny, you bring up that example, because I think that brings up a real oxymoron as people are in transition, is a lot of times you're reluctant to talk about where you are, that the fact that you maybe are between jobs, or that, your
Right.
tendency is to
Right.
kind of hunker down and get, but really it's counterintuitive, but you want to get out. You want to have that
Right.
discussion with people. And I think
That's
now
right.
more than ever, especially the environment we're in now, people are empathetic. They see that having a job loss, being in transition, isn't necessarily your fault.
Right.
They are looking at this from kind of a macroeconomic perspective, and it makes them feel good to help you. So take advantage of that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Help them make themselves feel good by helping you.
Yep. I guess one other little point to make, because I've been in this industry long enough. We talked about 2008, 2009, recession times. I was living in New York during actually 9/11. I was in DC at the time during Katrina, and so there were
Should
layoffs, right?
not be near you when a disaster strikes. Is that the point?
Right.
Right.
But where I'm going with that is to say, to not use, I want to work for a nonprofit because I was laid off from a for-profit. That's likely not the story you want to tell, right? It's
Okay.
and that's where your either skills and abilities focused on a community really get raised, to say, at this point, having had a great stint, in the for-profit world, I'm really excited at this stage to bring my, skills, talents, and abilities to this community, right? To this type of organization, and having an answer to that, I think is really important too. Which I will say, there's probably a handful of you that would consider yourself, 50 and over. So there is Encore Careers, and that's what they're set up to do, is focus on folks in their encore career, focused on the nonprofit and social impact space. So that would be another avenue to definitely look into.
Well, so you're saying don't make it sound, at least, like this is a fallback position.
Right. That's right.
Well, I'm not getting a job there, so I'm going to go do this other thing here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, because one of the kind of stereotypes out there is, hey, economy turns around, you're gone.
Right.
They'd be afraid of that, right? So you'd want to make them feel like, no, this is why I'm here, right?
Yeah. No, that's an excellent point. That's great. Anybody else have? I'm just kind of Oh, Neil.
Neil's got a question.
Mark, I'm going to go in a different direction.
Sure.
You've spoken a lot about how to pursue careers in the nonprofit world, and Matt and I spoke about what I'm going to ask you about last week a little bit. How do you find those corporations that might need the skill sets that we all have to help them build a better program and make a great impact in the community?
Right. So kind of the I want to say CRM, but it's not CRM, but the kind of the community
CSR.
Thank you. The CSR space.
For social responsibility for anybody to. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Well, yeah. I mean, I think a lot, we'll have to do with, what spaces that they really do focus on, because most of those, will for companies will have a particular space, right? So if it's just, for example, Nike or Adidas or something along those lines, right? They have a particular focus that usually they're trying to go after and and look at. So they have kind of the community that they're focused on, right? And it's not always the case. Some too tend to be a little more broad, but I think that's interesting vantage point to kind of look at. And so sometimes you can, get in. So strategic volunteering, so boards, right? I mean that's one avenue to think about, or well, that'd be pretty powerful, right? So some nice connections could be made there.
Well, actually, Mark, when you're talking about this, I'm thinking if somebody were to be, like you said, strategically volunteering for an organization, who then you have an opportunity to meet the funders of that organization, who might be a connection for you into the other side of that.
Yeah. Yep. For sure.
If anybody's happens to go to my website and sees the interview we did with Lori Harvey she is a person who is an executive director at a family foundation in Missouri. And she got into that work because she was a development officer that they dealt with at a hospital, and they really liked her style, and they set up their family foundation. She asked them to run it. So it was a nice connection into that because they had some exposure to her that way.
Yeah. I guess I'm curious, what so far, maybe Neil, have you been doing?
I've been applying for roles in networking to try to find those great roles. I've had success in interviewing for nonprofits. Haven't landed yet, but had success there. I don't apply for a lot of positions. I'd rather network to the right role. So, and I've been looking at sustainability type of roles. There was one at DuPont, which actually closed. It was actually more senior, a junior position than what the description had stated. So it was a non-starter, but there's, diversity, inclusion.
That's a big one.
Sustainability, community engagement, those kind of things. But unfortunately, I never want to come across as suggesting that COVID is why I'm where I am. But you can't deny the fact that if corporations are not engaged in the community the way they were, with thousands of employees in a building, it's a very different kind of set. So there's more blocking and tackling.
Yeah.
So I've been looking at communications roles that might be linked to, corporate citizenship, or, just telling a story about a corporation.
Right.
Does that help?
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense, and I'm generally a proponent of quality over quantity, when it comes to applying and so forth. But yeah, I mean, certainly I will float in my LinkedIn here before the session's out, and be interested to take a little bit more. You take a look a little deeper at your background too, and maybe come up with a few other ideas or suggestions.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'll connect with you on LinkedIn. Also send you a request.
Great.
Other thoughts or questions from folks?
Yeah, I got a question. A great presentation. Really enjoyed your comments, Mark. So it's kind of a follow-up to Neil's question. It's about finding resources that can help you, say, scan a bunch of organizations that are either focused on community engagement, social responsibility. I'm aware of GuideStar. I've used GuideStar often. I just want to know if are there other resources where you can go in and read about the organization, about the mission, rather than do sort of individual searches. If you think of an organization. So I guess my question is really, are there kind of resources that give you the opportunity to do a kind of a global search on nonprofits that are in a certain space, like social responsibility, community engagement? So that's my question.
Yeah, I mean, so a few that come to mind, or at least one that, so Charity Navigator would be another one.
Yeah.
But these are, a lot of these are kind of set up around kind of the funding of the nonprofit and kind of where their funds come from, but then certainly usually go deeper around how big they are and what communities or what locations they're in, right? So there's things like that. I think Idealist could be another one for you in that they're continuing expanding on their offerings and what they're doing. I know they recently just launched, you can now upload your resume there. So that'd be one. I will say, some of the some of the more local focused often could be foundations or training institutes. Sometimes can be good places too to look and research. I do know usually, for example, like the one-stop career centers, that they have some avenues that, and usually they'll have a link to some sort of online space where you can go and kind of research. So that could be something to look at. And then there are those, like what am I thinking of? Well, so Foundation Center, so larger, and again, it's but organizations like that likely could be some good places to do some research too.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot.
Mark, the one that hits my head, if you just want just plain raw data, not necessarily any kind of evaluation or more sophisticated, are the state nonprofit registration sites. So you'll see, and Rachel's bring up Candid, right, which is Foundation Center.
Yeah.
But the state nonprofit registration sites will at least give you some names. You can have an idea of who's around you if you're just want to get the basics of what a nonprofit is doing. Other thoughts or questions? Frank.
Frank had one. Yeah.
There you
I actually have several questions, and I'll put them out there, and then you can answer them, and there might be some overlap of information. First of all, your presentation has been very, very helpful. I think it's great that you've been able to summarize and give me focus on some of the things that need to happen in looking at the nonprofit area. But I'm not as sophisticated or as far along as some of my friends here in the group. I'm trying to understand in a very basic way, if I was in for-profit and I want to make that transition, is there some logical steps to go through? I understand the tips that you gave, but is there a logical progression to learn and to get committed to really land a role in this sphere? One of the questions that comes up in my mind as a sub point is, if one doesn't have a certain education for in policy or running nonprofits or even from the business side or whatever, is that a limitation? Is it possible that further training is required? And the third area would be in terms of experience. I think you kind of touched upon it with strategic volunteering, but if one is volunteered for a variety of groups, but nothing consistent and ongoing because one was taken up by the responsibilities of the for-profit world, what really is the best way to segue? What experience really is necessary to make the transition? So if you could address that, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
And Frank, was it sales and marketing, your background? Was that?
Yeah, I was in industrial sales and marketing. I think they call that, and I've done work like in business development, new business, managing people and projects and things of that sort. So I understand that it has to do with quote unquote fundraising a lot of times. So, but yes, it's sales and marketing to answer your question, but it's not like the digital marketing sphere. I'm more of a traditional, I'm an experienced person in more of the traditional marketing functions, probably not as strong on the digital side as that's come really, more recently.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I think, for you, I think what would come to mind as far as steps is likely kind of digging a little bit deeper into either, fundraising, because that does tend to be a transition that many folks do make, is kind of coming from that sales to the fundraising side of it. Another that we do see more of these days is companies with a product that are strictly focused on, the nonprofit community. And so,
Like a Blackbaud, for example.
like a Blackbaud would be an example. Even Salesforce, they have their own kind of division specifically for nonprofits. An organization here in the greater Boston area, Act Blue comes to mind. But even I worked for one, it was called Bidding for Good. And so we did online fundraising at the time, strictly for nonprofits in educational institutions. And so, in that space, it's mission driven, it's focused on the nonprofit space. But they're kind of the way they talk about things, account management, other things, is very similar to the, for-profit space. So that might be an interesting lens for you to look at. And so, places like, so B Corps. So B Corps is kind of this cross between for-profit and nonprofit. And so you can type in B Corp careers, and they actually have a career page there. And you could start to get an idea of some different types of companies that are kind of in that space.
By the way, people may not know that B Corps is based here in Devon, Pennsylvania, right?
There you go.
So that's a very good point. Actually, Mark, the one that comes to mind as you're talking about this is other revenue generation aspects of nonprofits, like admissions in a university, like working with hospitals to get their admissions and the income side of hospitals. My parents are in a CCRC, a continuing care retirement community, and the people who interact with the folks who are coming into those, they variously call sales or admission or other things that way. So very much a sales kind of job, but not necessarily fundraising, but it's a different revenue stream for the organization.
That's right. Yep. I forget who it was, but someone mentioned training before.
I don't know, Frank, was there more on yours, or is that?
Well, I was just wondering, is there any particular, if one doesn't have a particular education?
Right.
Or training, specialized training for, beyond having the experience. And I have a degree and things of that sort, but again, is there other things that these nonprofits are looking for? I mean, no matter if I have the passion and the desire and all these other things, are there other boxes that have to be checked in order to be still considered? Because whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, I mean, people want to find the right person with the right background.
Right. So I say, there are avenues, there are types of organizations, and, a degree, ultimately you'd be up against folks that have some sort of specialized degree, right? So I maybe think of, think tanks or in the health sphere, where you have masters of public health, right? And some others. So I think there are roles that I think likely are challenging, without a certain degree, but I think there's, particularly with, sounds like, the crux of your skills, would sound like there should be plenty of opportunities that you could, really have a solid shot at, and that it wouldn't be, at all focused on careers, focused on degrees, that is, sorry.
A little self-promotion here, but you want to go to Nonprofit.Courses, where you'll see thousands of videos and podcasts that you can then start getting background and figure out what matches your skill. what you're interested in, and then you can dig deeper from there. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, what I will say,
Right.
again, quickly, Frank, is again, usually, so AFP, Association of Funding Professionals, they have chapters around the country, and they'll do, you know, kind of short spurts of courses, you know, intro to fundraising, grant writing 101, you know, those types of things. And you know, if you dig a little bit deeper into, you know, philanthropy and fundraising, you're saying, yeah, that doesn't interest. Yeah, let me at least get, you know, a course kind of underneath my belt, you know, something like that that's recognized by, you know, anyone really in the fundraising space, you know, AFP. Then you know, that might be helpful too.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, actually, professional associations are a really good source for understanding what you need for the skills. Oh, the other thing too, when you're talking about professional associations, if you go to AFP's website or some of these others, is look at their partners, the companies that are sponsoring those organizations are often ones who have jobs that are, you know, you're helping a nonprofit, but you're not necessarily in a nonprofit. So any professional association is bound to have a list of these allied companies that might have opportunities.
Thank you.
Hi,
Rachel's
can I
got a
jump
question.
in? Yeah, actually, I have a comment, if I can piggyback on what Mark and Matt have said. Thinking about Frank's background and having come from the private sector myself, mostly in small business, I think it's worth mentioning or emphasizing something Matt alluded to.
Oh, and we lost you there,
Revenue
Rachel.
generating activities.
Rachel, go
Yeah.
back, rewind to Matt alluded to, because you dropped off there.
Oh, okay. Matt alluded to something I think that is worth emphasizing a little bit more, which is that more and more, as I'm learning in my program, nonprofits are needing to look more at revenue generating activities and you know, fees for services, excuse me, which nonprofits could really benefit from the background that Frank has in that. Even the acquisition of for-profit businesses that maybe need oversight or just need help in acquiring as a revenue source. So it's not always all about donations and grants. So I think that's that overlap of the benefits that for-profit business can bring to a nonprofit would actually give Frank a leg up, because you may have a lot of career nonprofit professionals who don't know very much about the private sector, for-profit sector. So just to keep that in mind, Frank, that I think you would have something very valuable to bring for an organization that's wanting to expand in that revenue generation area.
That's an excellent point. And actually what I'm going to do is put in the chat a video specifically on 10 nonprofit revenue sources that isn't necessarily fundraising. So that might be helpful for folks.
Mark, this is Neil again. It's just a comment. But first of all, the presentation was great. I love the way it was just presented at a great level, so we could really have an understanding of where you were going with it. But one phrase you used was cause letter, which is great, because as you said, anytime you can state why you are applying, the cover letter becomes your avenue to do it. You know, just like cause marketing in a company, which is a relatively new term, but the cause letter, in fact, make the connection.
Yeah.
I had an interview with a nonprofit I knew nothing about, and I said in the letter, I want to come work for you because I can take the corporate skills and follow my passion here to help you, and it got me the interview. So you can use that. It works, and it works really well because they're going to read the cover letter.
Yeah, exactly. Great double down on that. Thank you.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments? We're coming up to 10:30, and I don't want to, I mean, Mark's been really generous with his time here, and I want to make sure that we get everything in. Well, Mark, I'm sure that you would be happy to make yourself available for questions that you mentioned LinkedIn.
Yep, I will grab that link here and I'll put it in here momentarily.
I did have something to say as well.
Oh, please.
Thank you. I just joined. I had some trouble with registering, but I'm here now. So I appreciate your time and I appreciate this group as well. I would like to start my own nonprofit someday soon. And I have experience with AmeriCorps, and I've been involved with community service for a long time. So I'm familiar with the nonprofit world in a good basic fundamental sense. I'm looking to up-level my skills so that I can increase my nonprofit knowledge and experience. But would you consider doing any type of workshop perhaps on maybe taking a segment of how you can start your own nonprofit, what's required, what is the strategy to do so, perhaps like saying what skills are necessary for your background and how to position yourself with a team of good players so that you're not trying to start this nonprofit alone?
Yeah, I can, I'll point you to some resources. Send me a note. I just put my email in the chat room there. There are a lot of good resources, again, Nonprofit.Courses. But yeah, I'd be happy to make sure that you know, we can address that sometime, because that's a good career path to think of. Is and Mark, maybe, you know, have you had a lot of, I mean, you have clients who also start their own nonprofits?
I get contacted usually with some consistency every year for folks that find me in one way, shape, or form and kind of have this question. So I think it is an interesting one. In fact, I literally just this week received an email to that regard. I generally don't say that's really my expertise to say hey, yeah, I can, you know, have the resources and the experience to really help you start a nonprofit. I know of enough people that have, so that's always interesting. I think the one thing I'd recommend for you, Jennifer, to look at a little bit is, you know, this day and age, that a fair amount of the incubators, you know, would be really excited to take on. Again, you have to go through the application process still, but to take on organizations that you know fall maybe in the nonprofit space, you know, to be part of the cohort. So they'll run cohorts, you know, every year. Usually one a year, maybe depending on sometimes two. But then you'll be in this community of folks that are doing both. You know, some are, you know, looking to, you know, build a nonprofit. Others are looking to really build, you know, some other sort of company, you know, for-profit company. But you're all together and you're networking, you're learning together, and so I'd say that can be a really powerful place to be. You know, where you don't feel like you're in this alone, and you'll be up against, you know, probably a few different challenges, but you know, I know a handful of these kind of startup incubators. You know, they have them, you know, in multiple cities, and even sometimes I've seen people, you know, get accepted. You know, I think I knew a group that, you know, was here in this area and got accepted to one, I think like in Texas, for example, and vice versa. I've seen, you know, we have a few here, and I've certainly seen, you know, folks that have, you know, maybe they're not really from here, but they went to school here, but you know, they're applying too. So I think that'd be an interesting avenue for you to research a little bit further.
Well, and there's something else to not forget if you're ever interested in starting a nonprofit. It's called fiscal sponsorship, where
you
in effect rent a nonprofit designation. You're able to carry out your program. You do your own funding, but they handle a lot of the bigger issues. They are officially your board. They do the C3 registry. You are part of their C3 registration. An example of that is an organization called Fractured Atlas. But there are several around the country. In Philadelphia, I want to say it's the, here's good, thank you. Our Council of Nonprofits has a good resource there. GPUAC, Greater Philadelphia Urban Affairs Coalition, had for a time done fiscal sponsorship. RHD, Resources for Human Development, had done it. I don't think they do it anymore, but there's that's another avenue to pursue. I just posted a link on that a bunch of videos that are specifically on starting a nonprofit that you might also want to check out.
Will these be listed and sent in an email to the members who attended today?
If I go back to the tape and listen for them and try to do it.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I just meant the chat box, the resources in the chat
yeah,
box.
I'll see what I can do for the chat box.
You can actually save the chat.
Yeah.
You can save the chat. You click
yeah.
on the three little dots in
Yeah.
the bottom right.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
do it
while we're
right towards the end of
talking
the meeting, and it'll pop it into a folder on your desktop.
While we're talking about the chat, please put in your contact information in there, and your colleagues can reach out to you about what you do and follow up on things, because this whole thing is about networking and about connecting people together and having folks help each other. So that's a really important part of all this.
To ask Mark what the process is for, like, what the general process is that he does when he works one-on-one as a coach with someone. And so what his service looks like one-on-one, because that's something I might be interested in pursuing.
Mark?
Well, I appreciate that. Sure. So yeah, up until this year, 2020, I've always done one-on-one coaching. I think I'll continue to do that, but we'll be looking into do some more group coaching in 2021. But really, it's what I call setting up a discovery call. Really find out where you're at, what you've done, what your challenges are, and then I usually put together a specific sessions on what we look to cover. Usually the average is about 5 sessions with folks, and then what I found particularly this year is about 90% of my clients really want accountability, and so I'll, as part of the coaching, is kind of following up and continuing to strategize after we've kind of gone through the sessions, and as they're applying to work or getting interviews or other things, just touching base with them, making sure they're keeping on track, looking at any ways, any things we can do better, or even continue to expand their network. So it is very individualized when it comes to one-on-one. But I'd say, right, certainly my website, the Nonprofit.Course.org, gives you a good look at what the average person kind of coming to me would be asking for. So it gives you a good sense of what usually is included. But again, I really personalize it to the individual and what their goals are. Appreciate that question.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Jennifer, go ahead. What do you got?
Yes, I just was wondering, how do you get the chat box again? How do you save the chat box?
If you have problems with that, I'll be downloading it. So pop me a note and I'll send it to you. But you just open up the chat box. Let me see here. Lynn, can you give
do you have the chat box open, Jennifer?
I do, yes.
Okay. Do you see the 3 little dots down in the bottom right?
No, I do not.
Huh. Okay.
What device is she on?
Yeah. What are you working on?
I'm working on a laptop.
Okay. Well,
A laptop
it should be
or
there.
Chromebook?
Oh, right.
A
Where
Chromebook.
you would,
Yeah,
Chromebooks
that's
can't
the
do
issue.
it.
Yeah.
oh, really?
Okay.
Aha. All
There
right.
you go.
just send me an email at matt, M-A-T-T, at hugg.com, and I will send you a copy.
Thank you,
I'm going to
Matt.
guess it's the same thing on a phone. It won't let you save it.
Hmm.
I don't see it either. So I do have one quick question, Mark. So you talked a lot about working with, this is Laura. You talked a lot about
Laura?
people moving in, transitioning into nonprofits. What about people who've been working in nonprofits?
Yeah, for sure. The two biggest kind of populations are either what I call a sector switcher, right? So let's say you've been in education, and saying, I got plenty of contacts there, but I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do human services, environment, something else. Or folks that are now, looking for work in a new city and they don't have any contacts really there, and how best to do that. So those would be, more typical, folks. But curiously, what are you thinking? Where do you want to go?
So I have two different avenues, and I'm in whichever happens first. Either I want to be a CFO of a large nonprofit, 20 million above, or I'll continue working with the smaller nonprofits. I can have a consulting business and expand it even further.
So is that what you're currently doing, and just thinking, do you want to expand that?
So I am currently doing that, right? I have one, I'm an interim CFO of about a $10 million nonprofit. That will be ending this month.
Yeah.
They're bringing on a full-time person. Well, super long story, but anyway, I don't know if I'll continue consulting because I'm not done what I've been working on, and we did this last year. I left and we weren't together, and it's even worse now. So, this is why they're losing the money they are. So, so then I would need to fill in that time. If that makes sense.
Follow it. Yeah.
I mean, I have a few other little nonprofits. One's like $1 million. He seems to be expanding, trying to get them straight, got complicated funding. So they kind of need to do things differently. Right.
Yeah. I mean, some of it probably comes down to personal preference and what you think could work well. It could be a scenario where, if you might be able to find, a smaller mid nonprofit that, where you're, kind of part-time permanent with them, right? And you could still, take on some clients too. That could be an ideal, scenario for you too.
Right. Do you work with people to help do this? Is that what you do, or you help people that are moving from for-profit to nonprofit?
So in your example, it would, if you said, yeah, I think really my preference is, really looking to take on that role with, like you said, that $20 million organization roughly and above, that would generally, I'd say, fall more in line with what I do. And then it could be kind of an addition, like, hey, as kind of a small business and thinking about kind of developing, what might be some strategies there. That is something I've worked with folks on, which is, still kind of having that 9 to 5, but kind of working on their, I'm going to call it passion project on the side, which definitely have played in that space for quite some time. So, but if ultimately you were saying like, hey, I think I really just want help to grow my business, I'd say, yeah, I'm probably not the go-to for that.
All right, great. Thanks.
Yeah, no, appreciate the question.
Anybody else? Any other thoughts or questions?
I have a question.
Yeah. Who's there?
Yeah, so I have thought about, and the last question just kind of brought it to mind. I have recently applied for finance manager and CFO of a very small, I'm sorry, not very small, but a relatively small 5 million a year nonprofit. And I wasn't offered the positions, but I had very good feedback in those interview processes. And I also thought with my years of experience in bookkeeping and accounting that what would be the viability or would there be a need for in the nonprofit sector? Someone like myself who had, say, created a bookkeeping service and even made myself a nonprofit so that I could then really help start up in very small nonprofits, maybe nonprofits who decided to stay small but were meeting a very important need in their community. Because most of my business background, private sector, is small business. I have virtually no big business or corporate background, and I'm okay with that. I'm very happy in the smaller arena. And I wonder, from anybody who's listening, who, especially those who have been working in nonprofit for a long time, do you guys see in your sector or need for anything like that? And can Mark, you or someone else explain to me the specific benefits that I could bring if I were to become a nonprofit myself? I'm not looking to make a killing. I just want to be as effective as I can and make a living. So for me, it doesn't have to, if I'm a consultant, I don't have to be a for-profit. So, and if there's great benefits to me becoming a nonprofit, I'd like to know what they are beyond the most obvious.
Well, I mean, I guess initially I think about, the smaller nonprofit usually is pretty bootstrapped, right? And so the finances, it's very challenging. So it seems like that space, although, I generally say, if a nonprofit needs finances, they need it at some level, and they need some sort of income generation, so philanthropy in some way, shape, or form generally. So I think there's that going for you, but I think that kind of market, the small nonprofit, I think that's a very challenging market to say, I really want to focus on that. That being said, again, your definition, my definition, or Matt's definition of what a small nonprofit are, who knows, might be a little bit different too. But I'd say, likely there are organizations maybe already out there in the community that are doing, finance work with nonprofits, and maybe looking to expand that. And so it could be, just as I say, even this concept of, starting a nonprofit, sounds great. I often say, particularly, I'd say more, and even now too, but during the recession times, I said, the term kind of cash is king, right? That used to be a term. And I kind of like the term more collaboration is king. And so who might be able to kind of partner up with, that maybe is already in this space, and you're just able to bring more to it, And so I'd be curious for you to kind of look around at companies, CPA firms, other things, and see if, there may be some that are, doing very similar work, and you're saying, hey, I'd love to come in and help you expand that work even further. So I might have you think about that, as one idea. But I think at bottom level, I mean, numbers, data, are extremely important, and particularly, telling stories through data is kind of more important now than ever before. So, just reading articles and industry trends and so forth. And that's certainly one that's like now, like 2020, 2021 is, telling stories through data, and a lot of that is, through finance. Right. So, I think you're in a great place. And it's just kind of figuring out, where is that is, because, I've certainly seen people, work at, whether it's CPA firms or other firms, and then kind of take that experience and then roll it off into their own thing, because they're able to bring some clients and other things, down the future. So, again, food for thought.
Well, Mark, what crosses my mind is that, I mean, a lot of it has to do with equity. And if you're going to be a business, you own the equity. And if you're going to be a nonprofit, that equity in effect belongs to the public. So there are a lot of similarities between starting a business and starting a nonprofit, but that's a big part of it. Is where the differences are. The others, there's that middle ground, which is it's still in legal terms in many states still a business. The B Corps, but they're committed to doing social good. Some states have a special category for that now where you can incorporate as a B Corp. So that might be another path to look at where you're essentially giving license to yourself to do good things and are able to put out there to the public that that's why you exist.
Great, thank you.
That would be a niche, finances for B Corps.
Oh, well, that's true. Yeah. Well, and that's something else to think about too, is for everybody broadly, is that, there isn't just, and Neil and I were having a conversation about this the other day, that we all think of nonprofits as your typical charity nonprofits, the Red Cross, Heart Association, even universities and all that. They're 501c3s. But there are 26 other kinds of nonprofits out there that are not charities, but are still nonprofits. I mean, the ones that might come to mind straight off are chambers of commerce. You can't necessarily make a gift to a chamber of commerce and get a tax deduction. They're 501c6, or credit unions, or certain kinds of mutual insurance companies, or black lung trusts, cemetery corporations. All these things, associations of professional associations. They're all different kinds of nonprofits, but are not C3s. And that's now 70% of the nonprofits in the country are C3s. But these other kinds are worth looking at because it's a niche kind of business that has their own thing to do that are still fall within that social good area. By the way, the big difference between those and a charity nonprofit, where a charity nonprofit should be available and open to everybody, and typically they are, these other kinds of nonprofits are usually have a particular beneficiary group that you can draw a circle around, like a credit union membership only serves those people who are in a credit union. And so that disqualifies them for a tax deduction if you make a gift to them. But otherwise, they have a lot of the same trappings as nonprofits, and they're out there for the social good.
Good point, Matt,
great.
for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll be meeting tomorrow with a CPA whose firm specializes in nonprofit.
There you go.
Introduction. And so I don't know if he has work available, but I'm prepared to offer my services as an independent contractor if he should have some clients. And I've worked with CPA firms before and had a few clients. And I've worked for a chamber of commerce. So I've done budgeting for multiple events. And so all of these things have come together to just explode my interest and passion for helping in this regard. So it does look like there's some kind of a niche for this. So thank you.
Awesome. Good luck tomorrow.
All right, well, we're coming up on 11 o'clock. That's usually our official wrap-up time. Last call before we give our goodbyes.
I want to wish everybody a very happy holiday, and please note that we are having a virtual holiday social on Monday, December 28th from 6 to 8 p.m. It's a free event. Please BYOB, wear your ugly sweater or festive gear. And I've got my hat ready to go. There we go. Oh, it's not coming across with the virtual background, but
a little bit.
We will be doing networking holiday style, and we're going to have some games. We're not going to talk about jobs or LinkedIn or anything like that. So yay.
All right. Thank you very much. And I think that's so nice of you not to offer us a super spreader event for Christmas.
Yeah. We did have a wonderful holiday social and silent auction last year.
Oh,
With
yeah.
my doctoral dissertation, I can't even begin to put a silent auction together. So the best I could do was a Give Butter campaign. So, you know, if you would like to contribute to our cause, we'd appreciate it. I put that in the chat too.
If that event last year was done this year, we'd all have COVID in a heartbeat.
In a
That place
heartbeat,
was
yes. We were packed like sardines, but it was good. It was fun.
All right, guys. Again,
Really
if you want,
appreciate it, Matt, Lynn,
Thank you
everyone.
so
Really
much.
appreciate your time, and thanks for your thoughtful questions.
oh, thank
Wish
you.
you all
Mark.
the best.
This has really been great. And what's your website again?
The nonprofitcareercoach.org.
Well, thank you very much.
Awesome.
Great to have you. Thank you so much for being here.